Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Well, it's that time again. Time to step foot in the Wayback Machine and go check out some interesting reports from the news back then. Before we do that, a couple links I'd like to share. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch store to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters Volume 1, 2, and 3. The audiobook version is available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. They were written by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. The links to those books are in the description as well. Now, I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? A Wild Woman, Dubuque, Iowa. July 28, 1884. The news of a queer specimen of a female sex in the woods near Gordon's Ferry, a place about 12 miles north of here, reached Dubuque this morning, July 17, 1884. When first discovered by hunters, she was standing like a statue in a clear space with her back to them. They, wishing to get a square look at the strange apparition, got around in front of her, but they no sooner had done this. With an earthly scream, she darted off through the woods and ran about 300 yards. When she stopped, got behind a tree, and with a wild glare viewed the visitors at a distance. After another ineffectual attempt to discover her identity, she was lost to their sight. They explored the woods for over 2 hours, but were unable to discover any trace. The hunters described the strange creature as follows. She was apparently about 20 years of age, with sinewy form, a receding forehead, and eyes which shone with unnatural luster. Her hair about 3 feet long and black as jet, hung in disheveled locks over her shoulders and back. She was almost in the nude condition, and was minus shoes and stockings. No one in the neighborhood can give any information regarding the strange creature, but it is stated by one of the older residents that about 4 years ago a daughter of a farmer in a small Illinois town who had been engaged to be married to a well-to-do young farmer had mysteriously disappeared because of the refusal of the parents to give their consent, and not since then been seen. It is supposed that she subsides on roots and herbs, and lives in some cave among the rocks. It is probable that an effort will be soon made to capture her. This comes to us from the Oshkosh Daily, Northwestern Wisconsin, July 28, 1884. Antics of a Wild Man, Oldham County, Kentucky, August 13, 1884. The people in this county are much excited over the antics of a wild man who is roaming through the woods and frightening women in farmhouses. Comes to us from the Evening Observer, Dunkirk, New York, August 13, 1884. The Wild Man of Ochese Swamp, Chattahoochee, Florida, August 18, 1884. News has been received to the effect that a wild man captured in the Ochese Swamp near Chattahoochee and carried to Tallahassee did not belong to a Florida asylum, and that all inquiry proved unavailing to identify him. He had been swimming in the Ochese Lake from island to island, and when taken was entirely destitute of clothing, emaciated and covered with a phenomenal growth of hair. He could give no account of himself, and the theory is that he escaped from an asylum from some other state, and spent his time in the woods living on berries and etc. Comes to us from the New York Times, August 19th, 1884. A wild man in a cemetery. Visitors to Cypress Hills frightened by a strange figure. Brooklyn, New York, August 25th, 1884. Visitors at Cypress Hill Cemetery and residents of Glendale, East Williamsburg, and Fresh Pond, a little town just outside of the limits of Brooklyn, have been greatly excited recently by an occasional glimpse of a man who is said to frequent the woods in the neighborhood and who roams about in an exceedingly scant costume composed solely of oak leaves. Efforts have been made to capture the strange individual, but so far they have proven unavailing. The man was last seen on Tuesday evening when Mrs. Robert Mackenzie of number 208 21st Street, South Brooklyn, was attracted by a succession of screams and beheld a feeble old woman endeavoring to escape from a strange man. When the aged lady reached Mrs. Mackenzie's side, she said that while sitting at her lot in the cemetery, the nude figure approached her by the leaping movement and made the most frightful grimaces and acted wildly. The woman gave her name as Mrs. Banfield of number 116 Java Street, Greenpoint. Mrs. Mackenzie, when she saw the man, brandished a pruning knife over her head and threatened to kill him if he approached any nearer. With a maniacal smile, the wild man, as he is called, ran away, shouting some unintelligible gibberish. Superintendent John Runkle of the cemetery says that frequent complaints have been made about disorderly person being seen in the back part of the cemetery. He discredited the wild man's story, but stated that very strange stories were always to be heard concerning wild inhabitants of the graveyard. The Trenton Times, New Jersey, August 25th, 1884. A wild man in Peekskill, New York, December 3rd, 1884. Westchester County has been recently terrorized by the appearance and actions of a strange being, whom the residents of the little town, for want of a better name, dubbed the Wild Man. He has been seen by everyone, frightened everyone tried to catch him, and everyone has failed. After a score of tramps who looked more or less wild have been arrested, he disappeared as suddenly as he appeared, and the good people sleep peacefully without being compelled to barricade their doors to prevent him gazing in on them as they prepare themselves for bed. This habit was adopted by the wild man, who, when he saw others disrobe, always did the same thing himself. Comes to us from the Newark Daily Advocate, Ohio, December 3rd, 1885. Rockaway wild man, residents of the beach, alarmed by a stranger. Clad in a salt sack, he dances dittos, terrifying women and children. A searching party return without him. Drinks all around. Peekskill, New York, December 3rd, 1885. Recently, along the south shore of Long Island, there has been reports about the wild man with long hair, 2 sharp front teeth that hung down over his under lip, with long, shaggy beard and muscles that even terrorized the hardy members of the life-saving crews. His dress, like that of all other wild men, consists only of a salt sack girdled across his loins, and his body is of a dark saffron color. This is the wild man of Rockaway Beach. He first put in appearance 2 weeks since, but then he was only seen by men who were returning home late at night, and the men who told what they had seen were advised to give up drinking. On Friday, Captain Reinhardt of Life-Saving Station number 16, while patrolling the beach, saw the wild man. He ran out of a clump of cedars and executed a sort of war dance on the sand, much to the consternation of the captain, who ran back to the house as fast as he could, and could only be coaxed to do patrol duty again by Zafir Persall going with them. These two worthy patrolled the beach, but did not see him. On the same night, while Mrs. Falling sat in her little cottage mending bathing suits for next summer, she heard a tap at the window, and when she turned to see who it was, she saw the most hideous creature, which she likened to a big false face. She, with true womanly instinct, screamed at the face, like that of all wild men disappeared. He was also seen by F. Foster of Brooklyn, who was gunning at the beach. Mr. Foster was lying in wait for Duck, and saw him come out of the cedars, do a dance on the beach, and, turning a handspring, landed in the water. After plunging in the breakers a few minutes, sat on the beach in the sun, and then dried, then ran back into the cedars. On Saturday evening, several reputable citizens saw him, and a search party was organized. They met at Al Messel's Sunday morning. The searchers were those who lived on the beach during the winter. Al Runland was elected captain, Thomas H. Bond lieutenant, and George Gannett ropeman. At 10 o'clock, Captain Runland got his 48 men in line and spread them from the ocean to the bay, and each man within calling distance from the other, and they marched over the entire beach, but of course found no wild man. Once they thought they had him, immense footprints were found in the sand, and the toes pointed inward, gave the prints a peculiar appearance. They followed them to John Retson's barroom, but did not arrest John, as he said to be extremely tame. But the prints occasioned a set them for all hands. Sunday evening, the wild man was seen again, and another party will go out and see if they can locate him. Uncle Jim Renson is authority for a statement that the wild man is on of the museum wax figures of Out for a Walk. The Newark Daily Advocate, Ohio, December 3rd, 1885. Mountain wild man sighted by hunters, Lebanon, Oregon, December 31st, 1885. Much excitement has been created in the neighborhood of Lebanon, Oregon, recently over the discovery of a wild man in the mountains above that place, who is supposed to be the long-lost John McInerney. About 4 years ago, McInerney of Lebanon, while out hunting in the mountains east of Albany, and another man mysteriously disappeared, and no definite trace of him was ever yet been found. A few days ago, Mr. Fitzgerald and others, while hunting in the vicinity of the butte known as Bald Peter, situated in the Cascades, several miles above any settlement, saw a man resembling the long-lost man, entirely dissolute of clothing, who had grown as hairy as an animal, and was completely wild. He was eating the raw, fresh flesh of a deer when first seen, and when approached within a few yards before he saw them fled. Isaac Banty saw this man in the same locality about 2 years ago. It is believed by many that the unfortunate man who was lost became deranged, and has managed to find means of subsistence while wandering about in the mountains, probably finding shelter in some cave. A party of men is being organized to go search for the man. This comes to us from the Morning Appeal, Carson City, Nevada, December 31st, 1885. Gunshot fails to stop hairy man, or did it miss? Flea Creek, foot of Webb Range, Brindabellas, Australia, 1885. William and Joseph Webb inform that while they were out in the ranges preparing to camp for the night, they had a strange encounter. Down the side of a range to the eastward, and with only a narrow gully separating them. An object attracted their attention. They first heard a deep guttural bellowing, and then a crashing of the scrub. Next moment a thing appeared walking erect. Though they saw only its head and shoulders, it was hirsute. So much of the creature as was visible, and its head was set so deep between its shoulders that it was scarcely perceptible. It was approaching toward their camp. Now it was in full view, and was at the stature of a man moving with long strides and a heavy tramp. It was challenged. "Who are you? Speak, or I will fire." Not an intelligible word came in response, only a guttering bellow. Aim was taken. The crack of the rifle rang out along the gully, but the thing, if hit, was not disabled. For at the sound of the shot it turned and fled. The two gentlemen, filled with amazement and curiosity, but not alarm, went to where they had seen the shot at this very formidable-looking creature, and sought for its tracks and verification of what had happened. There were its footprints, long like a man's, but with longer spreading toes. There were its strides, also much longer than those of a man, and there were the broken twigs and disordered scrub through which it had come and gone. They saw no blood or other evidence of their shot having taken effect. Comes to us from Out of the Shadows, 1903. Wild man seen in local mountains, Happy Camp, California, January 2nd, 1886. The following letter was received regarding a wild man seen in this area. I do not remember to have seen any reference to the wild man which haunts this part of the country, so I shall allude to him briefly. Not a great while since, Mr. Jack Dover, one of the most trustworthy citizens while hunting, saw an object standing 150 yards from him picking berries or tender shoots from the bushes. The thing was of gigantic size, about 7 feet high, with a bulldog head, short ears and long hair. It was also furnished with a beard, and was free from hair on such parts of the body as common among men, palms and soles of the feet. Its voice was shrill or soprano, very human-like, much like that of a woman in great fear. Mr. Dover could not see its footprints as it walked on hard soil. He aimed his gun at the animal, or whatever it is, several times, but because it was so human he could not shoot. The range of curiosities between Marble Mountain and the vicinity of Happy Camp. The number of people that have seen it all agree on their description, except some make it taller than others. It is apparently living on berries and roots, and makes its winter quarters in some of the caves in Marble Mountain. The Del Norte Record, California, January 2nd, 1886. Monkey, like a child, shot in New York forest. Nyack, New York, August 16th, 1886. A group of hunters emerged from the Hook Mountain area the other day with the most unusual story. While enjoying their day of sport, they noticed an animal of some sort up high in a tree some distance away. Unable to determine what kind of animal it was, one of the hunters said he would find out the species. He took aim and shot at the creature, which let out an agonizing cry and fell to the ground. The hunters quickly went to inspect the animal and were astounded to find it was a bald-faced monkey. All were at a loss how to explain how such a creature could be found on Hook Mountain. While critically wounded, the creature was still alive, according to one hunter. It acted exactly like a human, putting its hands in pleading as a way a child would do. One of the men lifted the creature as one would lift a child, and it put its arms around the man's neck and sobbed. Greatly disturbed by this, the man hastened towards his home with the creature clinging to him, in hopes of rendering medical aid. Unfortunately, the wound it received was fatal, and during the journey its pitiful cries sank to a whisper and it died. All of the hunters were greatly touched by the incident. One of them offered that he could not have felt worse had an actual child been shot. Wow, that's sad. New York Times, New York, August 17th, 1886. A wild family caught in Kansas. Lynn, Washington County, Kansas, September 3rd, 1886. On Sunday evening, last while, 2 young men of Lynn were walking through the woods about 10 miles west of that place and a mile and a half south at a camp meeting ground at Parsons Creek. They heard a strange noise in the dense thicket nearby and started to investigate. They had gone but a short distance when they came in sight of what appeared to be 4 human beings. 2 were grown on apparently 14 years of age, and a child of 2 or 3. All were nude. They were dark-skinned, and the upper part of their bodies was covered with what looked like coarse black hair. As soon as they saw the young men, they all ran down the creek. The men followed and were gaining on them when they dropped the child, which a Mr. Walkup caught. Having lost sight of the older ones, they carried the child up to the campground where it was taken charge of by Reverend Proulet and brought to Lynn, where it can be found by all wishing to see. As soon as the party could be organized, they started in search for those who had escaped, and yesterday the man and woman and girl were caught, all of whom were naked. The man and woman are bald on the top of their heads, and it is believed that they were scalped a long time ago by Indians, which made them crazy. They will not eat cooked food, but devour raw meat like animals. The girl is 13 years old, and the people are a dirty ash. Color, neither white, black, nor red. When the little child was brought into the presence of its mother, she paid no attention to it, though the girl seemed pleased, as was the baby itself. The strange family has been supplied with clothing. All 3 of them are very hairy. The wild man, before captured, broke Reverend Black's arm. None of them can talk, though they make guttural sounds, which they seem to understand. Atchison Daily Globe, Kansas, September 3rd, 1886. A haunted mountain, mysterious lights that bother superstitious miner, a strange creature loose. Denver, Colorado, September 26th, 1886. Ever since the 7 Molly Maguire, members of a secret society of Irish Catholic Minor Union members, accused of committing violent acts against the owners and their allies, were hung in the Carbon County Jail at the base of Switchback Mountain in 1877. The miners hereabouts have been more or less superstitious, writes Mr. Chunk, correspondent of the New York World, and the more ignorant of them have from time to time asserted that spirits of the hanged men roam through the valleys and mountains round about midnight, seeking vengeance upon those who had been instrumental in securing their convictions and subsequent execution. Even those who were not superstitious and those testimony could not be relied upon asserted that they had seen uncanny lights repairing through the forest up around Mounts Pisgah and Jefferson, or flittering up and down the Switchback Plain, and thence through and around the valley and mountains. Gossip regarding the manor became so prevalent that only those possessed of the superabundance of courage ventured near the neighborhood after nightfall, and the good wives of the brawny-framed but simple-headed miners were gladdened by the unusual presence of their better halves within their homes as soon as night had cast its shadows over the hill, glen, and valley. The appearance of these weird lights soon led to the organization of parties of discovery, or rather the discovery, for when the exploring party would get within eyesight of the lights, the bravest would suddenly become tired, announce that it was only somebody smoking a pipe, and prevail upon the overwhelming remainder to go home and not make fools of themselves. Then they'd flit back and go to bed and put their heads under the coverlids. Up to 3 years ago, these uncanny lights were seen almost nightly, and the miners went so far as to state that they were accompanied by sounds not unlike that of chopping of fatal rope on Carbon County's Memorial Day, and that stiffened moans could be heard in the connection with the rope chopping seance. 3 years ago, the miners said that the spirits of the hanged men had been satisfied as the midnight parade suddenly ceased. The one of the exploring parties, searching through the switchbacks, suddenly came upon a dead, emaciated body of a man. They claimed that this was one of the hanged Mollies, but this was after disproved when the family of Thomas Fisher of White Bear Mountain claimed the corpse. Fisher was a maniac who had been roaming the mountains around this place for months, eluding the efforts of his pursuers to catch her. Shortly after Fisher's body was found and buried, the lights suddenly again appeared. They had forsaken the switchback region temporarily, and had turned their attention toward the valleys. Those who were venturesome enough to remain in the locality after dark alleged that they had caught glimpses of an emaciated figure, with a face fierce in its wildness, and the body nude as to clothing, to the waist and body being covered with long hair, and the arms terminating with claw-like fingers that resembled those of a beast more than a human. The "what is it" was only seen at night, at first, and when it approached would be suddenly just disappear in an unused mine. This was scoured, but without avail. The men have become more venturesome lately, and on several occasions a figure answering his description has been seen crossing the down track of the switchback, near what is known as the Hacklebarnick mine, and then disappearing toward the Broad Mountain. On each of these daylight appearances, the figure was handicapped by a load of provisions, barefooted and bare-bodied. It could be seen hurrying along, shouldering what in the distance appeared to be a bear, but what was probably a young heifer, which had been stolen from some of the settlers in the neighboring hills. Persons of veracity have seen this vision, so there is no chance for the assertion that love of sensation or Carbon County coffin varnish, moonshine liquor, had anything to do with it. Rumors were rife that the miners were again organizing, and that the Mollies would soon be on deck once again. Again, the braver of the miners organized exploring parties, but they had their trouble for their pains. A week or so ago, the announcement was made that the identity of the wild man of the mountains had been discovered, and it was Thomas Hurley, at one time well-known leader of the Mollies, who escaped when the others were hunted down. Everyone that knew that the right trail had been struck, the bottom was knocked out of this allegation when the old mother of Hurley received word that her son had died in Gunson, Colorado. This news was confirmed. Under the old woman's direction, the body was buried in Gunson, where Hurley had been working in the mines. It is hard to make the average miner believe that there's not something terrible about to occur. And when the mysterious lights and strange sounds are forerunners, the locality described is perhaps the wildest in the world. And most of the explorations are, as consequence, made in the daytime. "Aw, don't let it be a bit," said the grizzled old miner of the valley as he kicked away at the glistening sides of the mine, 200 feet underneath the surface. "Aw, don't lek it bet, and hef the byes tech may advice the wona search sarter. Not a gulet come of it." And the honest old Welshman shook his head dolefully. Others said that they would keep up the search until the spook was captured, or until they had proven what manner of thing it was. And the search is to be continued. Comes to us from the Rocky Mountain News, Denver, Colorado. A strange apparition, Logansport, Indiana, October 2nd, 1886. A telegram says that the people in the vicinity of Coates, a station on the Panhandle halfway between Logansport and Chicago, are living in terror of a strange apparition seen by several people. Some describe the strange being as a man covered with hair all over, and when he travels he strides along at a wonderful pace. He steps or jumps, as they call it, over 10 feet, and with apparently no effort. He is described further by other people as sort of half-human, half-animal, having a tail which he drags on the ground behind him when he is on the run. He has never been seen except coming out of the swamp, and whenever anybody approaches, he turns back and runs faster, apparently, than a racehorse. Lately, however, he has been seen at a house in the vicinity of the marsh, sitting down near the barn, tearing and eating a chicken from which life had scarcely departed. His mouth and fingers are covered in feathers and blood of the chicken, and when aroused he darted off with a low shriek. Some hunting parties have gone there, and we expect to give a better description when we return. The Pharaoh's Tribune, Logansport, Indiana, October 2nd, 1886. Escaped gorilla on Long Island, New York, November 12th, 1886. An escaped gorilla from the Dime Museum is making life miserable for Long Island farmers whose flock of sheep have been killed by an animal. Comes to us from Ohio, November 12th, 1886. The Semi-Weekly Age. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed that trip on the Wayback Machine as much as I did. Dude, like, what the hell is up with the writing? That's just like, while I'm reading that, I'm like, people are gonna think I'm a friggin' like idiot. Like that last one where the farmer or the miner was like, tech wa ta pa pa, whatever the hell he was saying. Like, what the hell was that? Literally, it was spelled out like tech, it, do, dee, da, whatever the heck. And yeah, that was fun. So anyway, I'm just glad that education has moved on and we don't talk like that anymore. So yeah, tomorrow though, tomorrow I saved some of the greatest, no, I'm just kidding, they're all great, but tomorrow I've got some really good headlines for you coming from the past. So stay tuned guys, and thanks for all your time, support, and kindness. And with that, I'm going to bid you farewell.